welcome back. This is Don Winkle with TeachingEntrepreneurship.org. Thanks for joining us. Today we're speaking with Jennifer Katz. She's the Director of Student Learning and Faculty Development for NC State Entrepreneurship. And today we'll be going through an exercise called Image Insights, which focuses on helping students with opportunity identification. So welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we dive into the exercise, give us a little bit of background of how you ended up here, with this exercise and engaged with NC State Entrepreneurship.
Sure. So I've been involved in entrepreneurship education with NC State University since 2001. And I kind of accidentally ended up on this career path. Have background in accounting and finance, worked for startup companies. And while I was doing all of that, I was volunteering with NC State University, helping them put together an undergraduate interdisciplinary entrepreneurship program. Eventually got to the point where we were growing rather quickly, but we didn't have the people and we didn't have the funding to continue that growth rate. So they sent me down and said, we'd really like for you to come on board full time, but we don't have the money, so we can't pay you quite yet. But we'd really like for you to help us raise the funds. So I called around, found a place to live that wasn't going to charge me rent with some friends.
You're very entrepreneurial.
Yeah. I said, look, just give me 6 months. If we can't get this up and running and funded where I can start getting a paycheck within 6 months, I'll go back, I'll get a real job, I'll move out of your house. But within 6 months, we had gotten the funding. I was able to actually become an employee. And I've been doing this ever since. So it was an accident, but one of the happiest accidents of my entire life.
Very cool.
So, since 2001, I've been working in interdisciplinary entrepreneurship education with students from all across campus, everything from freshmen to graduate students. And consistently, one of the things that I've noticed is that students tend to struggle with coming up with that initial idea. I'm sure, like so many other people, if I had to come up with, review another beer delivery business,
Right.
the same ideas kept coming up over and over. So I've been exploring ways to help push students out of their comfort zone and start to see the world around them from a different perspective, an entrepreneurial perspective, instead of just as a consumer. And that's where this came from.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool. And I think I can't agree with you more about the tiredness of a lot of the same ideas again and again. So I think this is a great exercise that people can use to maybe shock students out of that rut, right? So, okay, so then, so kind of run me through, right? How do we do the exercise? What as a professor, what am I doing? And let's sort of dive in and see what this looks like.
Perfect. So from a teaching perspective, this is a really easy exercise to perform in class. There's not a ton of prep that you need to do. I have done this exercise successfully with groups of 20 students up to groups of 100 plus students. So the idea behind Image Insights is that you start, let me see if I can show you an example.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So you start by printing out just a random image of everyday life. You bring those images into the classroom with you. When I'm doing a class, my typical class is roughly 100 students. I'll divide them up into teams of about 4 students per group. And so, for example, the image of the children arriving at school on a school bus, I'll give that image to maybe 4 different groups of students in one class setting. So every group is given a picture, and all the students are told, all right, you're going to have 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever works for the time that each individual teacher has available to get online, very quickly do some research, and identify at least 2 or 3 companies, startup companies, who are dealing with a product or a service that is impacting your image. And so students will kind of be like, what? I'm not really sure what to do. And I'm like, just get started. It'll get easier once you get started.
Yeah. But so they're looking for, they're not, at this point, they're not coming up with an idea. They're basically saying what companies are out there with something existing that relates to whatever you're seeing in the picture.
Absolutely. This isn't necessarily about them coming up with their own ideas quite yet.
Yeah. Okay.
This is how do you think about entrepreneurial opportunities in a broader perspective than what maybe you're used to.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, cool.
So Inevitably, once students do this research, I'll go around, have everybody present the company that they found and the pain or problem that that company is solving.
Yeah.
Very quick, rapid fire presentations. Inevitably, what happens? The groups who had the same images will overlap because they've done a quick Google search.
Right.
I see this the most. I use one picture that's a wedding party, and students will very quickly, startups in the wedding industry.
Yeah.
So they all get the same Google results. They click on the same first link or two to get their answers, and everybody presents the same companies.
Yeah.
So at the end of that first round, it leads to a really great discussion about, okay, how deep do you think you actually dove in terms of seeking out entrepreneurial opportunities? You know, how much time did you spend critically thinking about this concept versus just trying to get it done? And you kind of see that aha moment start to come up, especially, you know, if you have 4 teams all doing this for the same image. By the time the 4th one is presenting and everybody's already talked about their company, you can see the look on their face like, oh, I should have gone a little deeper into this.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point. Because after that first round is done, I tell them, okay, you know what? Everybody's going to have a chance to do this over again. We're going to do the exact same thing, but every company and every pain or problem that was just presented for your image by anyone is now off limits. So you can't talk about the same companies. You can't even talk about the same pain point. You got to go deeper. And I encourage them to think about, all right, don't restrict yourself to just what image you're seeing.
Yeah.
Think about what went into before this image actually was going on, what led up to it, what's going on in the background, what's happening as people go on with their lives after this one moment in time. Really expand the way that you think about identifying opportunities in the world around you. So I give them a little bit more time to do their research. In the end, they all have to present again. And it's a great opportunity as an instructor to point out how much more creative and how much stronger they were in their critical thinking when you remind them to get out of their comfort zone, don't do the easy thing, expand the way that you think.
Have you found that you know, certain kinds of images work better than other kinds of images? I mean,
you know, it kind of depends on the groups of students. I try to do images that are at least recognizable by most students. So for example, the school one is pretty recognizable by anyone, and it allows for a great opportunity to think about entrepreneurial opportunities in a lot of different areas. Everything from kids' clothing to school bus safety to technology being used in the classroom. The wedding one is great because there's so many opportunities in that particular industry.
Yeah.
I use one that is an airport, and that has generated some really interesting ones in the past. An image of people working out at a gym. You know, the things that we would see in a normal day.
Yeah.
Somebody has just gone in and taken a picture of. I use freely available images online, so it doesn't cost anything to actually run this exercise in class. It just takes you taking the time to print out the images.
Right. And it seems like it's critical for, you know, you need to have 2, 3, 4 groups looking at the same picture.
In my opinion, yeah, that's a critical part of this. So for example, when I'm working in a room where there's only 20 students, I might put them into groups of 3 or 4, just so I get a few more groups. And I'll only use 2 images. So half the teams get one image, half get another. That tends to give you a better discussion, gives you better opportunities, and it gives you a better chance just to make the point that you're trying to make with this particular exercise.
Right. Okay, no, that makes sense. Okay, so then they go through once and sort of get, you know, scratch the surface, and then they go through a second time and are instructed and sort of led into dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
These are off limits. Okay, and so then. So then, are there further steps? Are we sort of debriefing at that point?
So from there, it kind of depends. This is where it gets a little tricky. It kind of depends on what the students have given you to work with.
Okay.
So in my experience, sometimes this leads to a great discussion about, okay, you told me this company was entrepreneurial. What makes you consider them a startup? And the students get to defend, all right, why did we say this? And, and I don't know that you can define that moment when a company is no longer a startup and they've
Right.
moved on. But
Right.
it's a really interesting discussion to get students involved in. In other cases, we'll talk about student teams may have come up with, say, 3 different companies that
Mhm.
are all solving the same problem, same pain point. They're all trying to address that same pain point. And that's a great opportunity to remind students that, hey, you come up with an idea that somebody else is already working on, that's okay. But
Right.
you've got to figure out how are you going to differentiate and what are the elements that maybe the competitors haven't been addressing yet. Because I find that students often will come to me and say, we had this really cool idea, but somebody's already working on it, so we can't. I'm like, why? Why can you not work on it?
Right.
So I found that this exercise is particularly effective in my general education entrepreneurship class. That's geared towards helping students throughout the university who may or may not have any background at all in entrepreneurship, and they're seeing if they like it or not.
Yeah.
It's a great exercise to really get them thinking through what is entrepreneurial thinking, what does it mean to me, and how can I really turn this into something that's going to benefit me in the long run in my career.
Yeah. And do you do it sort of at the beginning of class or middle? I mean, is there a certain sort of timing within the class when you do this typically?
Not necessarily during a class period. I think of it more during the semester. So
Yeah.
the earlier that this can happen in the semester, the better, in my opinion. It gives all the students a chance to network, get comfortable with each other, make some of those mistakes about not digging deep enough early on so that
Yeah.
they can correct that situation as they move forward.
Right.
It just puts them in the right frame of mind for thinking about, okay, I see how other people have identified challenges, how they have solved challenges. Now, when we move into what pain points do I want to solve, it's kind of got them in the right frame of mind.
Yeah. Well, and it's something if you do it early in the course, in the semester or quarter or whatever, seems like it's something you can refer back to, right? You can use that
All
as
the time.
as a reference that is common and say, don't forget, remember this or whatever. So I think that it seems like there's more power to as early as possible, like you said, right, to get this going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the discussion points, you can find a way as a faculty member to kind of make the points that you want to make
Yeah.
based on what the students give you. So I find that going into this exercise, knowing, okay, when we leave, I hope that I've had the opportunity to make these 3 points today. Typically, they'll give you enough to work with that you can make those points.
You can finesse around, right?
Yeah, you really can.
Yeah. And I mean, are there sort of common points that you're trying to, you find yourself going in consistently trying to say, these are the things I want to sort of, get out of this, or I want to make this point or that point or the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So after all of this has happened and after you've kind of gone into those discussion points that you wanted to make, I always do a lessons learned. So I ask the students, okay, now that we've been through this, what lessons are your takeaways from the day? So for example, let's see, I pulled a couple of them out here so I can read them to you. One student said, I learned today that there are tons of opportunities to start new businesses. Every market or area has a niche to be filled. Another said, thinking deeper is not as difficult as I thought. I just have to remember to look below the surface level.
Yeah.
And those really are some of the lessons that I'm trying to make. Another one talked about, I learned that everyone in this class has a different way of thinking and coming up with ideas. Those are some of the lessons that I go into this trying to deliver.
Yeah.
Not everyone is going to see things and interpret things the same way that you do, and that's a good thing for an entrepreneurial team. That makes you stronger. So that point is always pretty easy to illustrate. And also that they should, instead of just going through their life kind of looking at the world around them and letting it pass them by, they should change their perspective and think about things in terms of what's happening, what are the opportunities that I see. In any given moment, I'm looking at a snapshot of life. What entrepreneurial opportunities are present?
Yeah.
and what happened that led up to this, what entrepreneurial opportunities might be present, and the ideas that students go on to develop. Since I started doing an activity like this and other activities similar to this, the ideas are so much stronger, so much more powerful.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer what you were hoping for?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, it's I mean, there are sort of these common elements of you know, how do you do it? How do you debrief it? You know, so for instance, another one is, do you, and I think I probably know the answer here, but just to ask it, do you do any assessment around this usually, right? Are you assessing this activity or?
As much as possible. Because it is such a quick activity. It is so early in the semester. The assessment is more anecdotal, just from my perspective of doing this semester after semester. So I have students actually submit their lessons learned at the end of the activity through a software tool called Socrative.
Yep.
And that's how I get everybody's lessons learned, so I can see, are they really taking away what I'm hoping that they're taking away, or am I missing the mark here?
Yeah.
Over the semesters that I've been doing this, it's helped me make just some small nuanced changes to help the students really get those lessons. What really, I think, sells me on the fact that this is working is what I see them able to accomplish throughout the rest of the semester.
Yeah.
Thinking about semesters when I wasn't doing this to when I am doing this, there is a noted difference.
And I would imagine noted difference in sort of the quality, depth of ideas that they have, but also maybe their engagement, because you know they become more engaged because they're working on an idea that's maybe a little more meaningful or has a little more depth to it or whatever. So I mean, I would imagine you kind of see both those things going on.
Yeah, hands down. I think it's made them, I allow students to form their own teams as well in a class that size. So we do some very targeted networking activities so that they can select good teams. And this type of activity in class really helps them put into perspective, what type of people do I want on my team? I need to make sure I'm getting a diverse group so we get that diverse thinking, because they can see in an activity that takes literally 30 minutes or less if you need it to.
Yeah.
They see the impact of having that diverse thinking on an interdisciplinary team.
Yeah. And so you let them sort of form teams naturally around this. I mean, especially if it's early in the semester, you don't really have a way to sort of force teams to accomplish your purpose, right? So, I mean, it's just a natural.
Yeah. So with this activity in particular, I've done it both ways. I've done it where there's literally the students walk in and they pull a random number out of a hat as they're walking into the classroom, and that's how they get their team.
Yeah.
I've let them select their own teams before, just randomly, and usually they'll pick whoever they're sitting with, which in most cases turns out to be kind of a random assortment.
Yeah, right.
But it prepares them for later in the semester. So when they're with their teams that they're working with all semester on their own concepts, it has put them in a better position to choose those teams well, with purpose.
Yeah. Wonderful. I think, I mean, this is a great way to kind of kick off and get them thinking from day one a little differently. And like you said, not to demean, but it seems like an easy, fairly easy exercise to execute, right? Where
it's incredibly simple to execute.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of prep time, and it'd be interesting to see sort of the different pictures and, semester over semester, if you use different kinds of pictures, what maybe happens.
Yeah, I haven't had to change my pictures up too terribly much. I started with a group of, I think, 8 to 10 images. I do things like, one is a fashion show, one is college dorm move-in day. So the freshmen really like that one because they've just been through it.
Right.
I told you about the airport, the gym, anything that people would normally see on a day-to-day basis. A shopping scene is a really interesting one.
I like it. Well, I like using just that sort of common scene, right? And nothing too staged and too complicated, but with so many different layers, like you said about the school bus. I mean, all these different layers that they could find within that simple picture. That's a way of doing it.
I think that a lot of students come into the class thinking that they've got to come up with something brand spanking new that nobody's ever seen before, and they forget that life gives us so much to work with.
Right.
If we just put our entrepreneurial lens on while we're living life. Yeah. I think this really helps make that point.
Well, I think the iteration is an interesting aspect too, right? Of to say, do it once and like, sort of scratch the surface, get rid of those that are oftentimes pretty crappy ideas, I think, right?
Right.
And then, okay, now do it again and dig deeper and do it again and dig deeper. And so I think that's an interesting lesson there too, to say, don't just do it once and call it good and move forward, but iterate a little bit and see if you can't come up with something better. So that's kind of I think that's an important lesson also, that you could refer back to later as well.
Hands down. And I'll tell you, I knew that this was a pretty big success in this particular class when students at the end of the semester in their final exam were referencing this activity and that exact lesson.
Ding, 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 ding. Right, you got it.
Exactly.
Yeah, you hit the bullseye on that one.
Exactly.
Very cool. Okay, well, and once again, we've been talking to Jennifer Capps, who's the Director of Student Learning and Faculty Development for NC State Entrepreneurship, about her exercise, Image Insights, which sort of opens students' minds to seeing the world around them and seeing opportunities in the world around them. Where can folks go to maybe learn a little bit more about the work you're doing there at NC State and you and connect with you and all that? So
sure. For work or for information on the work that NC State Entrepreneurship is doing, it's entrepreneurship.ncsu.edu. For me personally, Jennifer _ Capps, CAPPS, at ncsu.edu. Happy to help in any way that I can. If anybody's wanting to implement this and they have questions or they want to dig a little bit deeper into different iterations of this activity, I would love to talk about it.
Yeah, and just a personal plug, I've known a lot of the folks there at NC State for a while, and just phenomenal things you're doing, right? So,
well, thank you.
In terms of research, and super helpful and super transparent, and I've engaged with a lot of different folks there in conversations. So I enjoy what you're doing personally, right? And for anybody who's sort of seeing this, I would definitely encourage them to look into what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a powerful program you got together there. So.
Oh, I appreciate it. And thank you so much for doing this and making these activities available to educators everywhere. I think this is such a powerful tool that those of us in entrepreneurship education will have access to. So thank you for your work in this.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, I think that's part of what I see is there's lots of great people doing lots of these, and I don't know about a lot of them, right? So selfishly, I just go, I want to find out cool stuff other people are doing. And then through conversations, I realize other people want to do this as well. And so we decide to share them. So I really appreciate your time today and sharing this with us and helping us kind of get another exercise in front of faculty. And I think it helps to change classrooms. And that's really what we're all about. So I appreciate your time. And until next time, we will see you, and we can find us at TeachingEntrepreneurship.org is the website where this will be posted.